Friends, through this series of Saturday Wisdom talks, I try provoking my audiences into thinking differently and challenge the established practices. Disruption of established practices does stimulate the grey cells and many times aids in new ways of looking at life. I will talk to you today about corruption in our lives. Corruption is not just taking illegal money or bribing, as we know. Corruption can happen at several levels. The thought process also can be corrupted. So how do we deal with corruption? In order to do that, we need to understand what corruption is. It's generally an economic phenomena with an ethical aura. Very interesting. It can occur on different scales and can be petty corruption to corruption that affects the government on a large scale and becomes a part of everyday life, structure of the society. Systemic or endemic corruption is primarily due to the weakness of an organization or its processes. It can be contrasted with individual officials or agents who act corruptly within the system. Factors which encourage systemic corruption include conflicting incentives, discretionary and monopolistic powers, lack of transparency, low pay scales, and a culture of impunity. All this can promote corruption. In another context, corruption is the misuse of entrusted power by heritage. It has come to me through the ages. Education, marriage, election, appointment, or whatever else for private gain. This covers not only the politician and the public servant, but also the CEO or a CFO of a company, the notary, public, the team leader at a workplace, the administrator in a private school or a hospital, the coach of a cricket team, or anyone for that matter. Major corruption comes close whenever major events involving large sums of money, multiple players, or huge quantities of products like food, pharmaceuticals, medicines, often in disaster situations, are at stake. One should be watchful for corruption in all such places. Contrary to perception, corruption flourishes in situations involving high technology, since no one understands the real quality and value of the products, or in situations that are chaotic, such as natural disasters like earthquakes, floods, droughts, or the purchase of a technologically advanced aircraft, as it happens in the defense, where only a few can understand the technologies implied in development and production of such aircrafts, or where the number of actions is very large. For instance, in betting stations, as in cricket, where the results can easily be manipulated. Don't you think we must be watchful in all these scenes? If corruption is judged purely on the basis of business economics, macroeconomically it costs money to the society, which should be considered as a loss. From the microeconomic point of view, for the bribing entrepreneur, it is profitable. There is a contrast that I am trying to create here. The payer of a bribe secures a desired transaction which is evaluated on purely commercial grounds. Strictly speaking, should have been assigned to someone else. That will harm the individual entrepreneur and transactions that he undertakes. It will harm the national economy and also the world economy. In such a scenario, can corruption be looked at as good as well? We all understand that corruption exposes the flaws in the society that we have created for ourselves. Though people of different walks of life understand corruption differently, it is still relative based on what is codified in the law, what is defined in the law. So when corruption occurs, we know what needs reforms in the society. Reform can come in the form of a paradigm shift or a change in policy. Everything that is illegal is corrupt. But not everything that is corrupt is illegal. Corruption is merely anything outside the established social norm. Discussion of corruption is extremely difficult as it is a hidden phenomena in our societies. Both parties, in exchange of power for privileges, want to keep their transactions secret. That makes it so difficult to establish how wide and deep corruption penetrated our economy and social life. Moreover, what for some is no more than a friendly turn is for others a misbehavior. What in one place can be friendliness is unacceptable elsewhere. Even moral corruption will come in this space. Normal behavior at a particular hour of the day may be unacceptable at another hour of the day. Chris Blattman, professor in the Harris School of Public Policy at the University of Chicago, says, while the overall wealth is associated with lower levels of corruption, there is very little evidence that corruption leads to slower economic growth. The problem with most development policies is that everything is important. Everything matters for the development. However, herein lies the roots of corruption. Why might this be so? One reason. Most of us fail to imagine that corruption can also grease the wheels of prosperity. Yet in places where bureaucracies and organizations are inefficient, or where entrepreneurs and big firms struggle to import or export or comply with the regulations in place, corruption could improve the efficiency and growth. It's probably an antithesis, but one must look at it. Bribes can act like a piece rate or price discrimination and give faster or better service to the firms with highest opportunity cost of waiting. I lose a lot of money waiting. The example that is always given to illustrate such a case is the transport of fresh vegetables. Let's look at what this is. Is the payment of an insignificant amount of money at the check post, which can speed up a border check, or on the perishable cargo in the truck or ship, allowed? Is that payment allowed? He is not doing anything unlawful. He is doing what he has to do, but he does it a bit quicker or earlier. As a result, there will be a considerably bigger chance for those vegetables to reach their markets fresh. There is an assumption in this. The assumption is that such facilitating payment, the truck or that ship may be detained for many hours or even days, causing the cargo to turn bad, which will result in large financial losses. So what are we talking about? It's important to understand that we live in an imperfect world, and a bit of controlled corruption can function as a lubricant to overcome some of our worst problems. Maxim Mironov of the Graduate School of Business, University of Chicago, infers in a study on corruption that corruption which is uncorrelated with other governance characteristics is positively related to the GDP growth in countries with poor institutions. If everything is controlled, if everything is facilitated, then probably things can be different. He further infers that residual corruption is positively correlated with capital accumulation and productivity growth in developing countries. The empirical findings of the research actually support the theory that corruption helps in overcoming inefficient barriers. So what should we do? Like everything is defined and redefined to be consistent with the times, the global coalition against corruption in the last decade of the past century began calling corruption bad business practices. It doesn't call it corruption, which is a moral judgment and not an economical one. On the contrary, some of the business community consider corruption to be good business practices, as they make more money using corruption as a business tool. There are several theories. The theories behind the fight against corruption are moving from a principal agent approach to collective action problem, since principal agent theories seem not to be suitable to target systemic corruption. Systems corruption is very different. The India Against Corruption movement, organized by Anna Hazare and some other social activists involved in Team Anna, a strand of the anti-corruption movement, fought for the Jan Lokpal bill that gained momentum in the country during 2011. The Lokpal bill was passed in December 2013. The Jan Lokpal bill, also referred to as the Citizens Ombudsman Bill, an anti-corruption bill, was drawn by civil society activists seeking the appointment of a Jan Lokpal, who is an independent body to investigate corruption cases. Whatever happened to the original ideas and the bills that people agitated for, citing inadequacies in the Lokpal bill? In the ultimate analysis, corruption corrodes the fabric of the society. It undermines people's trust in political and economic systems, institutions, and leaders. It can cost people their freedom, their health, their money, and sometimes their lives. Fighting corruption, the current government seems to be on track with political reforms, including financing of political parties and elections, the economic reforms regulating markets and the financial sector, financial controls including budget, bookkeeping, reporting, parliament, local administrators and councils, registration, free access to information and data, maintaining law and order, improving and strengthening of the judicial systems. The current government would probably score on most of the factors listed. Even institutional reforms that include tax systems, customs, and public administration in general are being attempted. However, revealing all sources of funding to political parties must be a part of this process, as is the need to link voter IDs to the Aadhaar, eliminating the scourge of impersonations and non-existent voters. Whatever the method, we know that corruption will not disappear from the society. Hence, our efforts must be to restrict corruption and to protect as much as is possible the poor and the weak in our societies. In the end, all corruption costs are paid by the consumer and the taxpayer. They are the people who need protection. Can we do it? Corruption is as old as the human history. When people organize themselves into groups with powerful leaders, those leaders have abused their power. A study using game theory, evolutionary biologists Francisco Ubeda and Edgar Durance actually found that people cooperate to form a society, even though the ones in charge are corrupt, since they believed that it keeps their society together, and in part because they don't want to be punished by the law enforcers. However, the moot point is, where do we draw the Lakshmana Rekha? Friends, as is my wont, I have tried to challenge you, disrupt your thinking, and generally try to provide a counter view as well. Corruption is interesting theory that has been converted to an art form today. Unfortunately, the one who is caught is corrupt. Those who don't are probably the intelligentsia, pun intended. I close this episode of Saturday Wisdom for now with a promise that I'll be back the next Saturday with another topic to rack your brains. Until then, thank you, namaskar and dhanyavad. Stay safe, stay well, and have a great weekend.